In World War II, there were 5 brothers serving on a battleship in the Pacific that was attacked by the Japanese. Their name was Sullivan, the Sullivan brothers, and their story has become part of American folklore because they all died. That was more than 60 years ago, but their deaths cast a shadow that still hangs over military commanders today, and they do everything they can to prevent siblings from going to war together. There's no official military policy, but it's an unwritten rule, which is why it may surprise you, as it did us, to find 5 sets of brothers, all Marines, serving together in the same battalion in Afghanistan. We tracked them down to the edge of an unforgiving desert in the south of the country, where we met the Beans brothers, 2 fourth-generation Marines who went to extraordinary lengths to go to war together. We've covered a lot of stories on the war in Afghanistan on 60 Minutes, but this is not a story about war and battle. It's a story about brothers.
The story will continue in a moment.
We kind of felt like we had something to give back to our country. You know, we saw the legacy that we were handed down, and we kind of realized, without being pushed, but we just kind of realized that, you know, there's so many other people that have given so much more than we did, that we can enjoy the life that we enjoy.
Assalamu alaikum.
This is not the first time the Beans brothers have served together. Daniel, or Big Beans as he's called,
Hey, he's saying they don't want you guys going through there.
and his younger brother Joshua, known as Little Beans, were in Iraq 3 years ago.
It's like being with your best friend, you know. We slept right next to each other. You know, we lived in a little mud hut, but, you know, we had a little plywood wall, and I lived on one side and he lived on the other. And that was, you know, pretty much how we lived for 7 months.
Did you talk to each other through that wall?
Sometimes I would knock real softly and wake him up in the morning.
You were like his
Going to
live
reach
alarm
out.
clock?
No, I just, every once in a while I'd knock and make sure he was still there.
The Beans brothers weren't home from Iraq very long when they decided they wanted to go to Afghanistan together. President Obama had just announced he was sending 30,000 more troops to fight there. But the brothers' Marine Reserve Unit in Florida wasn't scheduled to deploy. So they spent the next 2 years searching for one that was, and found the Lone Star Battalion in Texas. The problem was, to serve with that unit, they had to come up with a story and an address in Texas.
We were opening up a lawn care business in Plano, Texas. That was our reasoning for making the move.
We had to have a reason to move to Texas and join that unit.
He worked the weed whacker.
So that's what we decided we were going to do, is we'd move to Plano, Texas, which I still, to this day, don't know where that is.
No idea.
That's a lot of trouble to go and fight in a war that not many Americans believe is worth fighting these days.
That's the great thing about America. Everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Is everything going okay, guys?
Lieutenant Colonel Todd Zink had an opinion, and it wasn't one the brothers would like. As their new commanding officer, he did not think they should serve together and decided immediately to separate them.
Everyone brings up the Sullivan brothers
From the
World War
Second
II.
World War.
Yeah. And so I thought it was, you know, my responsibility to try to minimize what harm could possibly come to any 2 sets of brothers.
Sullivan! Man this gun!
The story of the Sullivan brothers was turned into this movie called The Fighting Sullivans, a heartbreaking account of how all 5 brothers died in 1942 after a Japanese submarine torpedoed their ship.
There's just something about that bond of family and the idea that, you know, 2 brothers might not come back. That kind of kicks you in the gut.
Yeah, it does. I could see my own brother and I almost wanting the same thing, though. I think if we found ourselves in the same unit, we're that close. So, and as hard as it is, I can kind of understand them to some extent.
And they have to look at it from the other side of the table and say, well, if they were to both die while they were over there, then it'd look really bad on us, and family would hate us.
They were very eloquent in front of me, but I still wasn't convinced that this, you know, having them together would be the right thing.
But Colonel Zink had no idea what he was up against. The Beans brothers' family is steeped in Marine history. Their grandfather and great-grandfather both rose to Brigadier General, and the boy's father, Mark, was also a Marine.
And I told them I couldn't face their mother if they were both lost. And almost on cue, they presented a letter from their parents.
In the letter, Mark and his wife Crystal wrote, "We understand that both our sons could be lost or injured at the same time, but we would rather know that the two of them are together regardless of what happens."
Was that incredible to you, that the mother and father of these two young men were prepared to go to such lengths to see them risk their lives together?
It is kind of incredible, but maybe it's indicative that they really know their sons and maybe what their sons really desired.
Colonel Zink and the brothers' company commander, Major Mark Wood, struggled for weeks to come up with a way they as commanders could go against convention and support sending the brothers into combat together.
You decided what?
They would not be in the same squad, different squads, and they would not be on the same mission.
So those were the only restrictions?
Yes.
Some would call that a brave decision, considering the risk.
It's my decision. I'd have to live with it.
The Beans brothers had won, but the victory was not theirs alone. There were 4 other sets of brothers in the Lone Star Battalion, and all of them would now be allowed to serve together.
I've never heard of 5 sets in one battalion. That's truly extraordinary.
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented, yes.
We managed to get 8 of the brothers together at a remote U.S. base in southern Afghanistan. The youngest of the group are the Hendricksons, 20-year-old Bobby and his older brother Cody, who's 23. Gunnery Sergeant Hector Vega looks out for both of them, and for his younger brother, Sergeant Francisco Vega, who couldn't make it to the interview. Lance Corporal Matthew Faisler was the only one serving without his brother. Jonathan Faisler was injured during training. Raul Hernandez and his older brother Will are both Lance Corporals, and they also come from a family of Marines.
Do you worry about your brother out here?
I worry about him a lot. When he first got to the unit, I was like a mother hen. You know, he was a Marine, but I still feel like we're, little kids again. My mom told me, take care of your brother.
What did your parents think about you joining the Marines?
My mother actually went into the recruiting office and chewed out the recruiters. So she went in there, raising hell.
So she must have been thrilled when your brother joined.
Yeah, when he joined, yeah, she just didn't know what to do. We made the best of it. We comforted her as much as we could. We don't tell her certain things, we sugarcoat it. We church it up a lot whenever we call home.
You church it up a lot?
We church it up a lot. We make things sound like, oh, it's fine, everything's good,
This miserable stretch of desert road is where Daniel and Joshua Bean spend most of their time out here. Highway 1 is the lifeblood of the U.S. war effort, pumping supplies and fuel to every U.S. base across the country. Convoys like this stretch for miles, up to 1,000 tankers long, and the hired guns who guard them rarely wear uniforms.
It makes it a little bit nerve-wracking, when you're seeing guns, you're seeing weapons, and you're assuming, based on the indicators that you've got, that these are in fact private contractors. But at the end of the day, you never know. All you're doing is walking up to a truckload of people with guns.
The last thing you want to do is kill an innocent person.
Correct.
But you also don't want it to be you.
It's a double-edged sword, yes, ma'am.
In this part of Afghanistan, the Taliban still has strong support, in spite of the surge of U.S. troops. But they've changed their tactics. Instead of taking the Marines on in a close-up fight, they're concentrating now on a weapon that costs them little, bigger, deadlier roadside bombs. This is the scene of a massive attack on the Brothers Battalion. 5 Marines were trapped inside this burning vehicle. The roadside bomb they hit was so powerful, it sent their 17-ton MRAP flying through the air.
You just don't flip an MRAP. It doesn't happen. It has to be a massive amount of explosives.
Did you think they could all be dead?
Of course. Of course.
What are you telling yourself?
Is it bargaining?
Bargaining?
Bargaining. I was praying a little bit and asking for it not to be all of them. And maybe 2. Not 3, not 4, not all 5. Just let a couple survive, please.
For Major Wood, it was nothing short of a miracle that all 5 men inside the vehicle survived. One of them was crippled for life.
God was looking after us that day. We were hoping for the best, but we were preparing ourselves for the worst.
There was another event in the brothers' deployment that took a heavier toll. 2 of their Marines were killed by a U.S. drone that mistakenly targeted them in the midst of an intense firefight, the first incident of its kind since drone strikes began. It was Gunnery Sergeant Vega's job to help the men get through it. At 33, he's like the elder statesman and big brother of this group. And even though he's one of 4 Marines in his family, this was the first time he'd been allowed to deploy with one of his brothers.
Knowing that your brother's here, you almost have to put yourself at a different state of mind, if you will, to where if something does happen, how are you going to react? What are you going to say? What are you going to do? I role play, psychologically prepare myself.
Do you have a speech, something you would say to his wife? Something prepared?
No. How can you prepare, Lara, for things like that? What can you possibly say?
In all your years, you've been in the Marines, 17 years. Have you ever seen this many brothers together serving at the same time?
No, not at all.
Same place?
It's history in the making, if you ask me. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's good.
There's an ending to this story, and it's a happy one. All of the brothers made it home alive. The Beans brothers said the experience brought them closer. But for their parents, who wrote that letter that helped send their sons to war together, the worrying didn't stop until both their boys got home to Florida safely.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you.
I love you too.